Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Kennett, Senior Vice President of Clinical Care with PPMD. Thank you for joining us today for an update of Italfarmaco's development of Givinostat and currently enrolling Phase 3 confirmatory study in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We are joined today by Paolo Batica, Vice President of Research and Development, and Anna Christensen, Patient Science Liaison for Italfarmaco. Anna is an employee of TRINS and a rare disease contract, which is a rare disease contract research organization. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. Everyone on the webinar is on mute. If you have questions, you'll notice that there's a little box in the left-hand corner of your screen where you can type. We will see those questions and try to keep all of them to answer at the end. However, if it looks like there's a lot of confusion, then we'll move to answer those questions as the webinar continues. This webinar will be recorded and archived in about a week, so if you have reason to go back and review the information or want to share this webinar with anyone else, that will be possible in approximately 1 week. Without further ado, I will turn this now over to Dr. Batica, who will get us started. Paolo?
Yeah, hi, Kathy. Thanks a lot. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation and for allowing us to give you an update on where we are in the development of Givinostat. If you move to the next slide, please. This is just to remind you that obviously I'm an employee of Italfarmaco. The Givinostat is currently in development, so it's not on the market in any country around the world. And obviously this presentation is intended for dissemination and discussion of scientific information only. Okay, if you can move to the next one. So this is what I'm going to discuss today. I'm going to give you an update on our Phase 3 study, which is called EPID study. Then I'm going to spend some time in reminding you how Givinostat works. And then finally, I'm going to update you on some of the results in our long-term study. Please go ahead. Yeah, you can click again. Thank you. Okay, so this is a summary of some of the key features of the study, so the EPID study, and in particular we want to update you on what has been changed in the protocol with the amendment which is active in most of the sites around the world, including North America. So at the moment, we have recruited 83 boys in the study, and our target is to actually complete recruitment with 242 boys in the study. So obviously, we have some way to go. As I mentioned before, most of the North American sites have the new protocol active. And as you will hear in a second, this means that screening has become a bit easier compared to the original protocol. One last point which I think is very important is that if you have failed with the previous protocol, you actually can try again. So you can go back to your site and ask if your boy can actually be rescreened. So let me go a bit deeper into what has changed in the new protocol. So the previous protocol used a complex algorithm, a calculation that was aimed at identifying the potential fat fraction based on the functional test, and that then used the MRI as screening for some patient where the result was not completely clear. This is actually has changed. So the algorithm, this calculation is not in the protocol anymore. In essence, the boys will be screened and the selection will be based on the functional test, which is very common in this type of trial. And we will have MRI at screening, but once the boys have been randomized to the study, have been selected for the study. In the original protocol, you may remember we had a relatively narrow range of fat fraction for the selection of the boys to be enrolled. That range has been extended, so it's now a wider range of fat fraction that is allowed in the protocol. In the original protocol, the time to get up from floor was less than 10 seconds. Now there is a slight restriction, meaning that the boy has to get up from floor in at least 3 seconds and less than 10 seconds. So there is a range which is between 3 and 10 now. Okay, if you go to the next one. So let's spend a couple of minutes in going through the key inclusion and exclusion criteria of the current protocol. So as far as the key inclusion criteria are concerned, the boys that are allowed into the study should be able to walk, and there is actually no criteria on distance or velocity in the inclusion. They should be at least 6 years old, obviously with a genetic diagnosis of Duchenne. They should be able to climb the 4th stair in no more than 8 seconds. As I mentioned before, they should get up from floor in more than at least 3 seconds and less than 10 seconds. They are supposed to be on steroids for at least 6 months at a stable dose. Obviously, they should have no problem in doing an MRI scan, and they should perform the 4-stair climb consistently in 2 separate visits. If we look at the exclusion criteria, the boys are not allowed to the trial if they are taking investigational drug like idebenone, the exon skipping drug, or the PTC, the Translarna drug. They are not allowed if they are taking other drugs that can affect strength or muscle function, and this is mainly the growth hormone. Contracture actually is something that will be screened for, so if the boy has ankle contracture, they will not be allowed into the study. If a surgery is planned soon, that is also an exclusionary criterion. And obviously we need to ensure that there is a relatively healthy situation in terms of especially the heart and other neurological diseases. If you go to the next one. This is a schematic of the study. So in essence, the study will start with 2 screening visits. You remember that I just said that we need to confirm that the 4-stair climb is done consistently. That means that there will be 2 screening visits. The kids that have passed all the inclusion and exclusion criteria then will go and have an MRI, and then they will be randomized. And the randomization is 2-to-1 to Givinostat and placebo. So 2/3 will take Givinostat and 1/3 will take placebo. And the treatment will continue for 18 consecutive months. And as you can see in the picture, the MRI will be done at baseline, after 12 months, and after 18 months. Once the study is completed, all kids will be offered to actually enter the long-term study, which is already ongoing, which is called Study 51. And obviously, in the long-term study, all the kids will be receiving Givinostat for the remaining part of the time, and the long-term study will continue until we hopefully can get to the market. Just to remind you, so the timing of these different phases, screening usually takes 4 weeks. And then, as I mentioned, it's 18 months of treatment with different visits that I'm going to describe in a second. So if you can go to the next one. So the boys that entered the study obviously have their parents have to sign the informed consent, and they will have to attend in total 15 times their clinical site, their clinical center. In essence, apart from the first 3 months where there is a more frequent assessment, they will visit the site every 3 months. As I said, in the first 3 months, because we need to make sure that the dose is appropriately selected to avoid platelet reduction, then we have a more frequent blood draw, which is every week in the first month, every 2 weeks in the second month, and then, as I said, every 3 months. The kids and their parents will be asked to fill in some surveys and some diaries. Surveys are done at baseline, 12 months and 18 months. The diaries are done at every visit. At every visit, so every 3 months, the kids will perform the standard muscle test, so 6-minute walk test, the North Star, the Forster climb, and the quantitative muscle test for the strength. Pulmonary function will be measured at baseline, 12 months and 18 months. And as I mentioned before, MRI, so the thigh MRI, will be performed at baseline, 12 and 18 months. And then, as I said, the kids that will complete the study, they will be allowed to go into study 51. And let me remind you that this is regardless of their ambulatory status. So whether they are still walking or not, that is not a problem. They can go into study 51. I would also want to draw your attention to the right-hand side of the slide, because Givinostat is actually a liquid suspension. So in essence, the patient that entered the study will receive a box with different bottles, and the suspension has to be taken in the morning and after 12 hours, so morning and dinner, with some food. The food is, because the drug is a bit bitter, so if it is taken with food, this is usually better tolerated. Okay, if you go to the next one. Obviously, as you will see also later on, there will be traveling in this study, and so Italfarmaco is actually supporting all the families for all the different activities which are required for the study. In different ways, as you can see, first of all, especially in the initial part where there is a more frequent blood drawing, we have actually a system by which the nurse will come to your home to collect the blood. Then, because there is some traveling, especially for the MRI assessment, the travel expenses will be reimbursed, and there is a system to reimburse the patient and their family immediately. And then, as I mentioned also other times, obviously at the end of the study, the kids who still want can transition to study 51 and receive the drug in an open label fashion. If you go to the next one, this is really to describe where the sites are. The green dots are the clinical sites where the study is being conducted. These are 16 sites, 3 in Canada and 13 in the US. The stars are actually the MRI sites, and as you can see, they are 6. They are placed in different parts of the, actually they are 7, sorry, placed in different parts of North America. One important point to make, you can select which MRI site you want to go to. So at the beginning of the study, you can select the MRI site. The only thing is that once you have selected one site, one MRI site, that has to remain the same for the remaining part of the study to ensure that the data, the MRI data that we are collecting are consistent. If you go to the next one. So this is my update on the EPID study and what has changed in the study. Now I would like to go back to how Givinostat is believed to be working and to remind you what we have, if you want, all the information that we have acquired until now. So if you go to the next one. So Givinostat is an HDAC inhibitor, so it's a drug that works in what is called an epigenetic way, so it's acting on the way the DNA is translated. And we have been working on Givinostat actually for a long time, so that means that we have tested Givinostat in different clinical trials. In total 21, which means that we have actually treated more than 500 subjects with Givinostat in clinical trials, and part of them, actually now a very significant part, were children, both in Duchenne and in juvenile arthritis. Let me also remind you that as far as Duchenne is concerned, we have actually started the phase 2 study some time ago, and because the kids in the phase 2 study, most of them are still on treatment, that means that we have now 16 boys that have been treated with Givinostat for more than 5 years. If you go to the next one. So this and the next two cartoons are really a way to try and explain how we believe Givinostat works. And we really need to first remind us how the muscle usually repairs itself. And this is really based on the fact that within the muscle there are usually some special cells that are not active, they are in an off position. And every time we have a damage to the muscle, and so some of the fibers actually die, then these special cells in essence wake up, and then they will repair the muscle and by creating new fibers. If you go to the next one. So in Duchenne, actually, this system does not work properly. So first of all, on one hand, you know well that because of the lack of dystrophy, the damage to the muscle fibers is actually much more frequent. Not only that, but also the repairing system does not work properly, both because the special cells do not wake up properly, but also because instead of producing new muscle fibers, what is being produced is in essence scar or fat. And in fact, you know pretty well that the muscle in Duchenne is actually replaced by scars or fat. So if you go to the next one, we can then see how we believe that Givinostat is working. And Givinostat is really working on the different parts of the repairing system that I described so far. So firstly, they are acting on these special cells, on the satellite cells. then they are ensuring, by acting on these satellite cells, Givinostat stimulates the regeneration of the new muscle fibers. And also, on the other hand, it actually prevents the formation of scars and of fat. And let me remind you that this actually has been shown in the preclinical model, the famous MDX rat, but this has also been shown in a phase 2 study in 20 kids treated for 1 year. Okay, we can go to the next one now. So as the last topic, I would like actually to update you on the recent data that we have collected in the kids that I mentioned before are still on treatment with Givinostat. So if you go to the next one, here is a description of the study. As I mentioned, we started this study a long time ago. The original phase 2 study was, in essence, a 2-part study. So the first was 2 months of treatment, then followed by 12 months of treatment with Givinostat. This was the phase 2 study, which showed a clear pharmacological effect. And then we actually extended the trial for 2 consecutive times. And as a result of that, we have now 16 kids that have been on treatment for more than 5 years. So if you go to the next one. So here are the results that we have obtained on these kids. And first of all, we have looked at the respiratory function. When we started the study now more than 5 years ago, the kids were 7 to 11 years of age. So that means that now, after 5 years, one very important parameter for these boys is actually the respiratory function. And so here we are showing you what is the change of the predicted vital capacity and the predicted peak expiratory flow that you probably are familiar with, because these are 2 standard parameters which are being measured, I would say, in almost any trial in Duchenne. And also, there have been different studies that have shown that without treatment, having only corticosteroid treatment, there is a decline, a yearly decline in this parameter, which for the FVC percentage predicted is approximately 5% per year, and similar is for the PEF percentage. And here in the graphs, you can see what is the situation with Givinostat on top of steroids. And as you can see, the FVC percentage predicted is 2.3% per year, a 2.3% decline per year. And actually, we have seen no decline in PEF percentage, so suggesting that there is some beneficial effect on the respiratory function. If you go to the next one, the other thing we can actually do is see whether there is a delay in the age to loss of ambulation. You may have seen the result on the left-hand side of this slide. This is actually a result from the Synergy study, so probably the largest natural history study which is being conducted mainly in North America. And recently, Dr. McDonald and the Synergy group have shown that when in kids and boys who are treated with steroids, the median age of loss of ambulation is 13.4 years. And if we take another point, which is at which age 25% of the patient actually have lost ambulation. This is 11.1 years. So we have actually replicated the same approach, mathematical approach for our kids. And as you can see, if we start from the top, we have reached 25% of kids losing ambulation with 2 years of delay. So instead of 11 years, more than 13. And also, we are now able to start to look also at the median results. So when at which age the kids on steroid and Givinostat are losing, 50% of them are losing ambulation, and that is 15 years. So all in all, these data are suggesting that there is a signal of approximately 2 years, if not more, delay in the loss of ambulation. So if you go to the next one, obviously then we can also look at which are, if you want, the safety signals with the drug in this patient population. They are actually summarized here. The most frequent adverse events are actually well known for Givinostat and for the HDAC inhibitor. One is platelet count reduction. This is actually something that usually appears relatively rapidly. And by the way, this is the reason why in the EPID study, the kids have to have a blood drawn more frequently in the first 3 months. As we have seen in that study and are seeing also in the EPID study, we can actually control this adverse event by actually reducing the drug in the patient that actually need the reduction. And once the drug is actually reduced and the platelets are within the normal range, they actually remain in that range for the rest of the study. We have also seen some GI side effects. This is actually mainly diarrhea, and this is actually usually well tolerated. We have not had treatment discontinuation for this adverse event. So this is actually a manageable adverse event. In the study 48, we have seen some signal of triglyceride increase. These are obviously is one of the fat in the blood. This is usually transient, and also this is reversible and can be managed by adjusting the dose. Okay, if you go to the next one. So this is really to thank all the families and the clinical site and the patient organization that have worked with us and still and continue to work with us, hopefully to develop Givinostat for the patients. And if you go to the next one, I really would like to first of all let you know that obviously all the trial, both the EPID study and the study 51, are registered in clinicaltrials.gov, where you can find all the details. And also to introduce Anna Christensen, that is our patient science liaison for North America. And Anna, if you want to say a word, please do so. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the introduction. My name is Anna Christensen, so if you email me or call me, I'm the one that'll answer the phone, and I'm always happy to help folks figure out the study.
Thank you to both of you. That was incredibly clear. We have a few questions. First, is this study appropriate, Paolo and Anna, for people with any genetic mutation, or is there a specific mutation that this is more appropriate for?
So I can start with that one. So as Dr. Batika explained, Givinostat is an investigational drug that is really acting as a trigger that allows the muscle repair process to work more normally. So what we think is happening is that its action might help prevent the muscles of people with DMD from getting weaker than they are, and that's really what we're trying to figure out with the clinical trial. So what that means is people with any kind of genotype for DMD who are otherwise eligible can participate in the clinical trial. The genotype is not restricted at all.
Yeah,
Paolo, do you have anything to add? Sorry.
Well, I think Anna has explained it very well. So, as she mentioned, obviously we are not acting on the dystrophin gene, but we are acting downstream of the gene, and as such, any type of genotype would be allowed to the study.
Perfect. Could you explain a little bit about why people with Duchenne have difficulties with muscle repair?
So I can start, and then hopefully Dr. Batika can correct me or add more details. But one of the things that happens when you're missing dystrophin protein is that you have this group of proteins called the Duchenne-associated protein complex, and it's supposed to be held together by dystrophin. And when you're missing dystrophin, it's not held together properly. And so that means that its signals, which are normally what's controlling your muscle repair, aren't working properly. So then when the muscle repair and the maintenance aren't working properly, your muscle ends up with scar tissue, fibrosis, and necrosis, like you've seen in biopsy pictures and other presentations.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me expand a bit on this reply. Obviously, because there are a couple of points which I think are important to underline. First of all, when this complex is missing, it has been shown some years ago that the histone deacetylase are actually overworking. So in essence, they are not controlled anymore. And as a result of that, actually, they inhibit the translation of key factor for muscle regeneration. And obviously, if we inhibit, as we do with Givinostat, an overworking HDAC, that means that this key factor will actually be produced again in the muscle. The other piece which is important is, as we mentioned before, in the Duchenne muscle, there is more fat produced and more fibrosis produced compared to normal muscle fibers. And actually, a drug like Givinostat is working on this equilibrium. So instead of having more fat and more fibrosis, hopefully we will tip the balance back to having more muscle regeneration.
And you'll be able to see all of this with an MRI. There won't be muscle biopsies that are necessary?
This is absolutely correct. The muscle biopsy have been done in the phase 2 study and have confirmed what I just described. But obviously now we don't need that anymore because the MRI will actually tell us how much fat is being produced, and hopefully is less in the Givinostat group.
Okay. What would happen if a child lost ambulation in the process or in the course of the study? Not that we hope that doesn't happen, but.
Yeah, so people who finish the trial are all invited to participate in an open-label extension study, which would provide the ongoing access to Givinostat, and that's true whether or not you're walking. It's really open to whoever has finished the study.
Yeah, this is actually a very important point, also because hopefully you have seen the recent data which I've just shown, actually suggesting that the hopefully potential beneficial effect of Givinostat is not limited to the limbs but also to the respiratory function, and so even if the boy may lose the ambulation, they may still have a benefit from Givinostat treatment.
Okay. There is a question about HDAC. HDAC is a widespread process in many tissues, and how specific is Givinostat for muscle-associated HDAC?
So the HDAC are a family of enzyme, And the Givinostat is actually working on the class 1 and class 2 families. Some of them are actually very key for the muscle. It's obviously correct that the HDAC are present in all our cells, but I think it's important to say that because of the experience that we have acquired both preclinically and clinically, we can now say that we manage the dose of Givinostat in such a way that they are, if you're producing beneficial effect and not really affecting most of the other cells.
Okay, thanks. How do you expect Givinostat to affect acetylation, which is important for regulating protein cell signaling cascades? And how are you going to assess that acetylation?
So the acetylation was actually assessed preclinically, and it was confirmed that Givinostat is actually inhibit histone acetylation. In reality, we know by now that the inhibition of the deacetylation of histone is actually part of the pharmacological effect of all the HDAC inhibitor, and in particular of Givinostat. And obviously, there are also other proteins which are being regulated by this type of drugs.
Okay, thanks. All of the patients on the study previously and in this study are encouraged to take, well, they need to take steroids. So is there a reason why steroids are used in the study, and is there a thought to evaluate the impact of Givinostat without steroids, or are they always meant to be used together?
So when we actually started the development of Givinostat, we obviously, in fact, I think it was important to first demonstrate that Givinostat could work on top of steroids, as was usually the plan for each new treatment. Having said that, we are currently actually looking at preclinical models to understand whether if Givinostat could also work without steroids. And what I would say is stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have soon some new information that we can ideally also prompt additional work without steroids.
Is there a thought, Paolo, to at any point combine this therapy with another therapy to evaluate what combination therapy with HDAC inhibitors might produce?
So let me give you two answers here. The first one is that in terms of, if you want a logical answer, the answer is certainly yes, because we know that most likely combination is going to be an important part of the future in Duchenne. And certainly the fact that this drug is working in any type of genotype, and because of the mechanism of action, that clearly triggers the idea of actually combining with other drugs. The second answer is more a regulatory answer. As you know, until now, the idea is that we have to first show the effect of the drug, the efficacy and safety of the drug on its own, and after that, then we can start looking at combinations.
Okay, that would be great, because I think we all realize that combination therapy is most likely going to be in our future, so that would be wonderful. There's another question about targeting. Is Givinostat targeting type 1 or type 2, or selectively targeting, or just targeting all HDACs unselectively?
So in essence, they are targeting type 1 and type 2 subclass with some different affinities, but actually they are all in the nanomolar range. Okay.
And what effect does Givinostat have on acetylation of non-histones?
Well, actually, this is not an easy answer to give, because we know that actually Givinostat and the HDAC inhibitor are actually interacting or controlling several hundreds proteins. So I think we could spend more than a couple of days if we have to list them all.
Thank you. What happens at the end of the trial, Anna?
So what happens at the end of the trial is that families would be offered the opportunity to enroll in a separate open-label extension study. Obviously, like all clinical trials, it would be optional, but we just want to make sure everyone knows that they have the opportunity to continue if they wish to.
And we don't know how long the expansion trial or the open-label trial will go on, right? We'll just assume it will hopefully go on and.
Yeah, the intent is for it to go on until it's commercially available or until the project is ended for other reasons, which hopefully wouldn't happen. But the intent is for it to be an ongoing program.
Okay. Hello, did you want to add something?
No, it was exactly the same reply. So. Yeah.
Okay, good. Are there any drugs if people are on drugs that would make them ineligible for this trial? Is there a washout period, or are they just automatically excluded?
So for most of them, actually, there is a washout period. What I suggest is that if people are interested, if they go to clinicaltrials.gov, they will have a clear details on what is the washout period for which drug.
Okay. And is there any thought to expanding this trial at some point in the future to patients that are less than 6 or to non-ambulatory patients who have not been participants?
Yeah, so what we are, as you can imagine, the whole development of Givinostat is actually goes beyond the EPD study. And by the way, for the European authorities, we are obliged to actually present what is called a pediatric investigational plan that requires us studying in patients who are not ambulatory anymore and also in the less than 6 years of age. So that will certainly come. The idea is to reach certain points of the EPD study that will provide confirmation, and then this type of studies will start.
Okay.
Let me also remind you, because maybe that was not clear to everybody, but we are also running a phase 2 study in Becker, muscular dystrophy. This is currently done in Italy and in Holland, and it is a phase 2 study, but then following the results, we can decide how to expand that also.
Okay. Will you continue to collect outcome measures in the open label phase of this study?
Yeah, in essence, what happens in the study 51 is that the participants are asked to come to the site every 4 months, and every 4 months the functional tests are being collected, so 6-minute walk test, Forster climb, and all the package, and every year we are actually measuring the respiratory endpoints.
Okay.
Which obviously is something very important because, as you know, there is a lot of natural history data which are being collected, so hopefully we can compare them to the natural history.
Absolutely. I think it would be good to collect the respiratory endpoints as well as maybe upper ambulatory or upper limb function as well, but we have a little ways to wait for that phase of the study. So, does North Star is being addressed in the extension study, correct? You're collecting the 4-star climb and 6-minute walk and time to ride.
The North Star is both in the EPD study and in the long-term study. Right. By the way, because you mentioned something actually very important, in the long-term study we are collecting also the performance of upper limb. So we will be looking also at the function of the upper limb.
Okay, good. And there's no MRI evaluation in the open label extension?
No, at the moment, no.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think we've come to the end of our questions. I really appreciate you explaining primarily the difference between the inclusion criteria from the previous protocol as well as the current protocol. And I think that it was incredibly clear that if people were not able to screen into this study previously, that they should try to rescreen. And I hope that all of the centers have gotten that message as well. Paolo, do you have any last comments that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one information because obviously we have discussed about how if you're on other drug might be exclusionary to the selection on the study. One thing which I think is important to underline is obviously that there is no exclusion coming from if you're on the gene therapy. And also that obviously patients who are on Givinostat, if they then decide actually to try the gene therapy, obviously they will have no problem in doing so. Hopefully also they will have, if you're on more preserved muscle, there obviously will be an advantage in any type of gene therapy.
Absolutely. And you're hoping, you have enrolled, you said 80-some participants. Are those from the U.S. or globally? And how many patients in the U.S. have you enrolled?
So at the moment, actually, most of the patients are coming from Europe. And so we hope really to have more U.S. patients. At the moment, I think of the 83 is approximately 20 in North America. Okay.
And there's a question about travel once you're enrolled in the trial, but I would assume that as long as you are able to travel around the required clinic visits, that would be allowable?
Yeah, so there is, in essence, a travel agency that takes care of the travel, and then it's really up to the family to discuss with the travel agency which is the way of transportation that they would prefer to use, including their own car.
But if they want to go on vacation once they're in the trial, as long as they're available for the required visits, then that should not be an issue, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, that's not an issue.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
correct.
And once the patient, you're fine. Once a patient chooses a study site as well as an MRI site, then they should stick with those locations, correct?
This is correct, yes.
Okay. Excellent. Anna, do you have any other comments that you'd like, or closing comments that you'd like to add, or any other additional information?
Yeah, I just want to share on behalf of the whole team and all the clinical trial sites, we just really appreciate the Duchenne community for being so supportive of our trial. And I know that I'm always remembering questions in the 2 minutes after the conference ends, so please feel free to email or call anytime. I'm happy to talk further about the study.
Thank you so much. And also just to mention again, this is being recorded and it will be archived and available on the PPMD website in about a week. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Anna or feel free to reach out to me at PPMD or any of us at PPMD, and we will either answer your question or send you to the person who can answer the question. I want to thank both Anna and Paolo for this incredibly clear webinar. It was wonderful. And thank you for your time, and thank everybody for joining us today. This
Thanks a lot for your
webinar.
Time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. This concludes this webinar.